On Thursday, I returned to school, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. As I sat down, one of my classmates, a girl with curly hair and bright eyes, raised her hand and asked a question that struck a chord with all of us. I get really shy when I have to speak English. Can you help me overcome my shyness? She said, her voice barely above a whisper. It was clear she was anxious. Our teacher, a kind woman with a warm smile, responded in a gentle tone. You know, it's completely normal to feel unsure when speaking a new language. We are all learning here, and making mistakes is just part of the process. It's okay to feel a bit nervous. I could see the relief on the girl's face. I felt it too. We were all in the same boat, trying to navigate this foreign language. Everyone in the room nodded, sharing our unspoken fears. It was comforting to know we weren't alone. As we settled into our lessons, I thought about how this journey to England was not just about learning English. It was about building confidence, making friends, and embracing the challenges together. I wondered what other stories my classmates had. Each one of us had a unique journey, and I was eager to hear them all. When I first started learning foreign languages, I was really shy, just like my classmate. I remember feeling so nervous every time I had to speak. My heart would race, and my hands would get all sweaty. I was always afraid I would mess up. I can still picture that day in class. I sat there, listening to my teacher, and I thought, what if I say something wrong? The thought made me want to shrink down in my seat. Then, if I actually made a mistake, I'd feel so embarrassed. It was like everyone was staring at me, even if they weren't. Sometimes, my cheeks would turn bright red, and I just wanted to disappear. I thought, why can't I just speak like everyone else? But deep down, I knew I wasn't alone. Everyone around me was trying hard too. We all had our own fears. I started to see that making mistakes was part of learning. It wasn't the end of the world. Maybe, just maybe, I could help others feel less shy too. That thought made me smile a little. I began to wonder how I could support my classmates in overcoming their fears, just as I wanted to overcome mine. This journey was more than just learning English, it was about growing together and finding our voices. Now, things are different for me. I use languages for communication every day. It feels good to express myself, even if I make mistakes. I care only about getting my point across. Right now, I'm learning Spanish, which is exciting. I love the challenge, even though it can be tough sometimes. You know, embarrassing moments still happen. Just the other day, I tried to order food in Spanish, and I mixed up a couple of words. I felt my face turn hot, and I thought, oh no, I hope they understand me. But you know what? Those moments don't stop me. Sure, I might feel shy when I speak Spanish, and yes, I blush sometimes, but it doesn't bother me like it used to. I remind myself that feeling shy is totally normal. Everyone goes through it, and it never lasts forever. Instead of hiding, I keep pushing myself to speak up. I've learned that using Spanish is the only way I can truly get better. Each time I practice, I gain more confidence. It's like building a muscle. The more I use it, the stronger it gets. I can't wait for the day when speaking Spanish feels as easy as breathing. That keeps me going on this journey, and I'm excited for what comes next. Now, things are very different for me. I use languages for communication every day. And it feels great to express myself, even if I make mistakes along the way. I care only about getting my point across. These days, I'm diving into learning Spanish, which is both exciting and a bit challenging. I really enjoy it, but I also know that it can be tough sometimes. Just the other day, I was at a small cafe, and I tried to order my favorite dish in Spanish. I mixed up a couple of words, and I could feel my face getting hot. I thought, oh no, I hope they understand me. It was a little embarrassing, but you know what? Those moments don't stop me. Sure, I still feel shy when I speak Spanish, and yes, I blush from time to time. But it doesn't bother me like it used to. I remind myself that feeling shy is completely normal. Everyone experiences it, and that feeling never lasts forever. Instead of hiding in the back, I keep pushing myself to speak up. Each time I practice, I notice that I gain more confidence. It's like building a muscle. The more I use it, the stronger it gets. I found that even when I stumble, it's just part of the learning process. Each mistake teaches me something new. I think about all the conversations I want to have in Spanish and all the connections I want to make. The thought of chatting with new friends in a different language keeps me motivated. I can't wait for the day when speaking Spanish feels as easy as breathing. That goal drives me forward on this journey, and I'm truly excited for what comes next. I know that every small step counts, and each one brings me closer to my dreams. I try to see things as they really are. I'm a student, and I'm on the path to becoming good at Spanish. It's a journey, and I know it takes time. Just like learning English before, I understand that you can skip steps. It's not possible to jump from being a beginner to a perfect speaker in 1 hour. I remind myself of this often, especially when I feel frustrated. There are days when I struggle with words, and it feels like I'll never get it right. But then I think back to when I started learning English in England. I remember feeling lost and unsure, wondering if I would ever catch up. It took practice, patience, and a lot of effort. I had to accept that making mistakes was part of the process. Now, with Spanish, I keep that same mindset. I tell myself, one step at a time. Each new word I learn feels like a small victory. I celebrate these little wins, even when they seem tiny. Sometimes, I spend hours just trying to remember a single phrase. It can be tiring, but I know it's worth it. I picture myself chatting with friends in Spanish, sharing stories and laughing together. That vision keeps me going. I also remind myself that everyone learns at their own pace. Some days are good, and others are tough. That's all part of the journey. It's okay to take my time. Each moment spent learning is a step closer to my goal, and I'm excited to see where this path takes me. I know that one day, I'll look back and see how far I've come, and that thought gives me hope. I also think about what I mean to the people around me. When I started to speak some Spanish, I noticed I had value to those who spoke the language. It felt good. It's like opening a door to a new world. I remember the first time I had a real conversation in Spanish. I was so nervous, but I did it. And you know what? It made me feel proud. You should see it the same way. When you already speak some English, you can have conversations with others. That's a big deal. Just think about it for a moment. Look at what you already know. You've learned around 2,000 words. That's impressive. You've gone from knowing nothing to having a solid vocabulary. It's like climbing a mountain. And each word is a step up. You should really appreciate that progress. Sometimes, we forget to celebrate our small wins.
I remember when I was in England, trying to understand everything around me. It was tough, but every word I learned felt like a little victory. Each time I spoke with someone, I felt more connected to the world around me. I saw smiles on people's faces when I tried my best. It showed me that learning a language isn't just about the words, it's about the connections we make. When I chatted with friends, or even strangers, I felt like I belonged. I could share jokes, ask questions, and learn about their lives. It was magical. So, take a moment to recognize how far you've come. Every effort you make matters. You're building bridges with your words. And that's something truly special. The journey is long, but each step is worth it. Some students have this feeling that knowing English means you have to speak just like a native speaker. They think you need perfect pronunciation and perfect grammar. They believe you should speak flawlessly, without making any mistakes at all. It can be really overwhelming. I remember when I first felt that pressure myself. I was in class, surrounded by my peers, and I heard someone speaking so smoothly. I thought, wow, I wish I could do that. It made me feel embarrassed because I knew my pronunciation wasn't perfect, and sometimes I mixed up words. I could see other students felt the same way. They would hesitate to speak up because they didn't want to mess up. They thought if they didn't sound perfect, they didn't know English at all. It's like they were trapped in their own minds, thinking, what if I say something wrong? I could see their eyes darting around the room, looking for a place to hide. But I realized something important during those days. I learned that making mistakes is a part of learning. I started to notice that even the best speakers made errors now. And then, they would laugh it off or correct themselves, and that made me feel better. It showed me that nobody is perfect, not even those who speak English fluently. One day, a teacher reminded us, it's okay to make mistakes. It's how we learn. Those words stuck with me. I began to understand that knowing a language is more than just speaking it perfectly. It's about communication, connection, and sharing ideas. I decided to stop worrying about being perfect. Instead, I focused on expressing myself. I started joining conversations, even if I felt shy. I found that people appreciated my effort. They smiled and encouraged me, and I felt more confident. Each time I spoke, I felt a little braver. I learned to enjoy the journey of learning English, mistakes and all. After all, every step forward counts, and it's all part of this exciting adventure. These students are often very hard on themselves, and I can understand why. I used to feel that way too. It's easy to think that you have to be perfect right away. I remember sitting in class, watching my classmates and feeling like they were so much better than me. I would think, why can't I speak like that? I was often my own worst critic, and I know many others felt the same way. They would sigh and shake their heads, frustrated because they stumbled over words or forgot what to say. But one day, our teacher noticed our struggles. She looked around the room and said, "You all are doing great. It's important to remember that you already speak some English. That's a big deal." Her words caught me off guard. I hadn't thought of it that way. She went on, "It's not necessary to be hard on yourselves. Learning a language is a journey, not a race." I could see some students nodding, and a few even smiled. She encouraged us to keep working on our English. "Every little bit helps," she said. "The more you practice, the more your confidence will grow. Your shyness can gradually go away." I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It was like someone had lifted a weight off my shoulders. I realized that I wasn't alone in my feelings. We were all in this together, learning and growing as a group. From that moment, I decided to change my mindset. I started focusing on the progress I was making instead of the mistakes. I joined conversations, even if I felt a bit shy. I found that each time I spoke, I grew a little bolder. My classmates cheered each other on, and it felt like we were all rooting for one another. We shared stories, laughed at our mistakes, and learned from each other. I remember one time I tried to tell a funny story in English. I stumbled over the words, but everyone listened and laughed along with me. That moment was special. I felt connected, and it made me realize that speaking English was not just about perfection. It was about sharing experiences and building friendships. I knew then that I could embrace this journey and enjoy every step along the way. I really like what our teacher tells us in class. Her words always make me feel better about learning. She has this way of encouraging us that makes me want to try harder. Sometimes, though, I still feel shy. It can be tough, especially when I'm in a group of people speaking English so easily. I know I should practice speaking more, but in some situations I freeze up. I think, what if I look stupid? That thought makes me hesitate. I start to worry about my pronunciation or if I'll use the wrong words. I remember one day in class, we were all paired up to practice speaking. My partner was a girl who spoke very well. I felt nervous as we started. I wanted to contribute to the conversation, but I kept holding back. I thought to myself, just say something, but my fears kept me quiet. I noticed other students were sharing stories and laughing.
I felt a bit left out, and it made me realize that I didn't want to miss out on those moments anymore. That's when I made a decision. I thought, maybe I can be a bit braver. I knew that every chance I got was a chance to practice. I promised myself that I would try to speak up more, even if it felt scary. It wouldn't be easy, but I wanted to challenge myself. I wanted to see how much I could grow if I took those little steps. So, the next time we had a speaking activity, I took a deep breath and jumped in. I started with a simple sentence. To my surprise, my partner smiled and encouraged me. That little bit of support made a huge difference. I felt a wave of confidence wash over me. Each time I spoke, I noticed that my fears slowly began to fade. I realized that it was okay to make mistakes. Everyone was learning, just like me. I began to appreciate those moments when I stepped out of my comfort zone. I learned to embrace the awkwardness and the laughter that came with it. Speaking more often helped me connect with my classmates, and soon I found myself looking forward to those conversations. It was becoming fun. I could feel my courage growing a little each day. Then, one student raised her hand and shared her thoughts with the class. She said, "Sometimes I want to say something, but I don't know the word I need. It's so frustrating. I stop, and I just don't know what to do next." In those moments, I feel really stupid. It's like my brain freezes. Then, the next time I have a chance to speak English, I don't want to say anything at all. I just want to avoid that feeling again. Can you help me with this? Her words hit home for me. I could totally relate to what she was saying. I remembered so many times when I was in the same boat. There were days in class when I wanted to jump in and join the conversation, but then I'd suddenly forget simple words. It felt awful to be silent while everyone else was chatting away. I thought, what if they think I'm not smart? I could see other students nodding in agreement. And I knew I wasn't the only one struggling with this. Our teacher listened carefully, her expression kind and understanding. She smiled and said, "You're not alone. We've all been there. The key is to keep practicing, and it's okay to ask for help when you need it." Hearing that made me feel a little lighter. It reminded me that even the best speakers have moments when they forget words. It's just part of learning. I thought about how I could change my own mindset. Instead of seeing these situations as embarrassing, I could view them as chances to grow. Maybe I could write down words I often forget and keep them in my pocket. That way, when I felt stuck, I could glance at my notes for a little reminder. I imagined having a small notebook filled with helpful phrases and words, ready for me to use whenever I felt lost. After class, I talked to the girl who had shared her feelings. "You know," I said, "we could help each other practice. We can talk about things we like and write down the words we need. It might make us feel more prepared." She smiled, and I could see a spark of hope in her eyes. It felt good to know we were in this together. I realized that by supporting each other, we could build our confidence and make speaking English a lot less scary. We could turn those stupid moments into learning experiences. That thought gave me a new sense of excitement for the journey ahead. Our teacher stood in front of us, her smile warm and encouraging. She said, "When you start to speak English, there's one important thing you have to prepare for. There will be moments when you don't know the word you want to say." As she spoke, I could see many of my classmates nodding. We all understood this feeling. It was something we had all experienced at one time or another. She continued, "In those situations, you will need to learn how to describe the word instead." I sat up a bit straighter, really listening now. This ability is very important when learning a new language. It helps you communicate even when you're stuck. I thought about how many times I had frozen up during conversations. I remembered moments when I was eager to share my thoughts, but the right words just slipped away. I could almost feel the frustration in the room as we all thought about it. But our teacher's words gave me hope. She explained that instead of feeling embarrassed, we could use our creativity. If you don't know the word for umbrella, for example, she said, you can say the thing you use when it rains to stay dry. I smiled at that. It sounded silly, but it made sense. She encouraged us to practice the skill. Try it with your friends, she suggested. If you're not sure of a word, describe it, and see if they can guess what you mean. That idea sparked excitement in me. I imagined us playing a game where we would take turns describing things. It would be fun and also a great way to learn. I decided to try it out right away. After class, I approached a few classmates. Hey, let's practice describing words, I said. They looked at me with curious smiles. I could see they were eager to join in. We formed a small group and started tossing around different words. At first, it felt a bit awkward. But soon we were all laughing as we tried to guess what each other meant. I realized that this was a fun way to break the ice and overcome our shyness. Each time someone got a word right, we cheered. It was thrilling to see how we were helping one another. I felt a growing sense of confidence, knowing that we were learning together. With each description, I noticed my fear of speaking started to fade. I was excited to keep practicing and discovering new ways to express myself. This journey was turning out to be more enjoyable than I had expected. Our teacher continued to explain, and I found myself hanging on her every word. Since you are not a native English speaker, she said, you will probably never know as many words in English as you do in your native language. That made sense to me. I had always felt that there was a gap between what I knew in my first language and what I could say in English. I looked around the room and saw other students nodding in agreement. We all shared that feeling of being limited sometimes. But then she added something that caught my attention. I can tell you that you can describe almost every word you need. You only need to train the skill. I perked up at that. You will have to learn how to express ideas using the vocabulary you already have. Her words felt like a light bulb turning on in my head. I realized that even if I didn't know a specific word, I could still communicate. For example, she said, if you don't know how to say the word key, you can describe it as a small thing for opening a door. I smiled, picturing a key in my mind. It was so simple, yet it opened up a whole new way of thinking about language. I felt a wave of excitement wash over me. I could imagine myself in a conversation, needing to describe things instead of searching for the exact word. That evening, I decided to practice this new skill. I sat down with a friend who was also learning English. Let's try to describe words we don't know, I suggested. She looked at me, curious but enthusiastic. We took turns picking random objects around us and describing them without using their names. At first, it was a bit challenging, but soon we were laughing and having fun. One time, I pointed to my phone and said, "It's a small thing you use to call people and take pictures." My friend smiled and quickly guessed what I meant. It felt great to see her excitement when she got it right. Each time we successfully described an object, I felt my confidence growing. I began to realize that I could share my ideas even if my vocabulary wasn't perfect. As we continued, I started to see how much this practice helped us both. We were no longer focused on getting every word right, instead, we were focused on communicating. It felt freeing. I knew this was just the beginning of a fun new way to learn. I could already picture all the conversations ahead, full of creativity and laughter. I was eager to keep practicing and improving. Our teacher continued with a smile, "You also describe words in your native language without even realizing it. Think about it. When you don't know the word for something, you just explain it to the other person. You say things like, 'It's that round thing you use to drink water,' and they understand. It's a natural way to communicate." As she spoke, I could feel a light bulb go off in my mind. It made perfect sense. I glanced around the room and saw nods of understanding from my classmates. It felt like we were all connecting over this common experience. "You can do the same thing in English," she said, "but you need to train this ability." That word "train" really stood out to me. It reminded me that learning a language is like building muscles, you have to work at it consistently to get stronger. She went on, "Thinking aloud is a very good technique to use when you want to describe well." I was intrigued. When you think aloud, you just say what comes to mind, even if it's not perfect. It helps you organize your thoughts. I like the idea of talking through my ideas without worrying too much. It felt freeing. That night, I decided to give it a try. I was sitting at home, feeling a bit nervous about my upcoming conversation practice with a friend. I thought, why not practice thinking aloud? So, I started describing things around me. I looked at my chair and said, "This is a piece of furniture where I sit. It has 4 legs and a back." I felt silly at first, talking to myself like that, but I could already see how it helped me think more clearly. The next day, when I met my friend, I told her about my little experiment. "I practiced thinking aloud," I said excitedly. She laughed and said, "That sounds fun. Let's do it together." So we began to describe random objects in the cafe where we met. I pointed to a coffee cup and said, It's a small container where you drink hot beverages." She quickly guessed it, and we both cheered. As we continued, I noticed we were becoming more comfortable with our descriptions. Sometimes we would fumble over words, but it didn't matter. We laughed it off and kept going. Each time we successfully described something, I felt a surge of confidence. I realized that this technique was a game changer for me. I could see how my ability to describe things was improving with every practice. This was just the start of a wonderful journey, and I was eager to see how much more I could grow. With each day, I was becoming more confident in my English skills. I knew that if I kept practicing and thinking aloud, I could express myself better and better. It was exciting to think about all the conversations I would have in the future.